Alright, I only recently started crafting Generation 3 legendaries, and to my surprise, they were rather cheap. Which sounds like quite a paradox, I know. And if Mystic coin prices keep rising, they might even become the cheapest to craft, as we're only gonna need 38 Mystic Clovers for these weapons instead of the usual 77. As with any other legendary, there are items and currencies you can farm, and those that you will have to farm. In this case, that is Imperial Favor for the blessings of the Jade Empress, a gift of Cantha, a gift of battle, and some spirit shards. All of the other items can be acquired with gold, but even if your budget allows for it, maybe you shouldn't be throwing your hard-earned cash at it. Not with my method at least, because we're gonna impose an artificial time gate on ourselves to farm the Imperial Favor, which will guarantee we also get the other materials by playing instead of paying. Let's start with Imperial Favor, and for clarity's sake, I'm gonna go over zone by zone, but I usually do the hero points and hearts first, before I hunt for the Jade Runestones. There are 2 repeatable hero points in Saitung province, which should take you less than a minute each. They'll always award you 1 writ, which converts to 5 favor, and a random amount of favor on top of that, as well as a sizable amount of experience points. And the latter is equally as important, because we want to have enough spirit shards by the time we get to around 3500 favor. All 3 hearts in Saitung province are rather fast to complete, although I often only do the training grounds. The reason we're doing these repeatable hearts is for the vendors that will unlock. Each of them will sell you a writ for some karma and exchange 5 writs of your current zone for 1 of each of the other zones. And our final activity in Saitung province is the Spirit Vestibule, or the dreaded maze. Although it's really not that bad once you figure out what to do. There are 2 parts to this. First, you'll have to run around to collect a green, red and blue totem, and then you'll have to kill a boss that corresponds to each of those colors. If you have a commander tag, you could actually hover over the maze with your sky scale and mark the locations of each of the totems and the boss rooms. Or you could simply run around the maze in its entirety, which is what I actually recommend, as it's littered with chests and each of them will give you a chance to acquire a Jade Runestone, which we'll need later. For running around, I recommend having a stun break and either having access to super speed or equipping a relic of speed to reduce the time spent exploring. For fighting each of the bosses, you're gonna want a build with enough baked in survivability so that you can out-sustain any damage they throw at you. My double shortbow Soul Beast build that I posted a few days ago actually covers both the running and the bosses without having to swap any trait or skill. I always stick to the same route as well. I start by going left and I make my way around going clockwise, and I make sure to check every single corridor for either a totem or a chest. There are some enemies scattered throughout the maze, but you can simply run past them and ignore them most of the time. And by the time I end up on the other side, I should have every of the totem buffs, and both the red and blue bosses are really close by. For the green boss, we'll have to backtrack, as that boss room is at the start of the maze. The bosses themselves have a really high amount of HP and a special attack they execute every quarter it goes down. If you're struggling with any of them, let me know and I'll make a video specifically showcasing the maze. New Kaineng features 2 more repeatable hero points and 2 of the fastest hearts to complete in Cantha. The first is near a waypoint, as well as 1 of the hero points, and teaches you how to use your Jade bot. You don't have to do the challenges to complete this heart, as you can simply use the zipline and hop off immediately, which will still get you progress. The second heart is coincidentally next to the other repeatable hero point that has you fight a purist. To complete this heart quickly, look for doors with a speech bubble and interact with them. 2 enemies will jump out, and as soon as the second one dies, you'll be carrying an item which you will have to deposit at one of the yellow markers on your minimap. You will only need 3 doors to complete this heart, so don't bother doing any of the other events, which all take much longer. And our final hero point is actually in Arborstone, in a corridor to the side, so make sure you don't skip that one. Echovald Forest has no repeatable hero points, and the hearts are quite frankly a pain to do, so I simply skip them. The map does have 5 chests, as well as a mini dungeon though. I'm gonna link a map to each of the locations in the pinned comment, which was made by a Reddit user, as this will be much easier to follow than a video. And that brings us to Dragon's End, which has a vendor that sells you writs without any prerequisites. Just make sure to not buy the one that costs 10 Imperial favor. And there's also 1 more mini dungeon to complete in this zone that only takes a couple of minutes at most, which was actually pointed out to me by a kind user in the comments of one of my previous videos. Whenever any event or meta is going on in my current location, I usually try to stick around and help out, as this will speed up the rate at which we can acquire Imperial Favor, but they're not really necessary if you want a simple and quick routine. I also have a Jade Sliver module equipped at all times. It isn't the best in terms of gold per hour, but you can trade Jade Slivers for writs for even more progress towards your next legendary. This whole routine will award you with a sizable amount of experience and will be your main source of Imperial Favor, as well as giving you about 12 to 15 Jade Runestones per day. And since we only need 100 per legendary, we can sell the excess on the trading post for some extra gold. This extra gold can be used for the second part of our routine, which is doing a daily chest and mining run in the Bjora marches. Both Tekit and Elisa have made excellent routes for you to follow, so you don't have to aimlessly run around looking for chests. Tekit's focuses on a single loop, while Elisa's uses waypoints to get around much faster, so basically pick whichever you like the most. We do this to get Eternal Eye Shards, which can be traded in for Living World Season 4 currencies, which can be consumed for volatile magic. This volatile magic will allow us to buy trophy shipments, which will contain a lot of the items we need for the gifts of Condensed Might and Magic. And remember me mentioning the artificial time gate when it came to acquiring Imperial Favor? Well, I found that by the time I get to 3500 favor, I could buy so many trophy shipments, which could be funded with the excess of my Jade Runestones, that I not only would have enough for the gifts, but also enough gold to buy the 100 Mystic Runestones and any of the antique summoning stones I was still missing. So instead of splitting up our whole shopping list into farming experience, farming materials and so on, doing the Cantha routine as well as the daily Bjora marches run will cover most of the ingredients we will need. I've also been placing a lot of emphasis on experience for Spirit Shards, and that's because our legendary will require 200 Spirit Shards for a Bloodstone shard, and if you craft your own precursor, you'll need another 50. I would highly recommend crafting your own, as this will save you anywhere from 50 to 80 gold, which we can put to use elsewhere. And you might be thinking that your precursor will then still cost around 80 gold, but actually it won't. If you run Dragonstorm daily, you'll have enough memories of Aurene, which will save you another 50 gold. And if you want, you could also choose to do a daily Dragonfell and Dragon's End, which will net you even more memories. And we're actually going to want more than 250 Spirit Shards, because another rather expensive component are the 5 amalgamated Draconic Lodestones, which will easily cost you another 100 gold if you buy them. Instead, we're gonna craft them ourselves in the Mystic Forge. The problem is that the Lodestones they require are expensive as well. And that is where our Spirit Shards come in. Instead of buying the individual Lodestones, we're gonna make them ourselves, which will save us another potential 30 to 40 gold, which really starts to add up if you combine it with the gold saved on the precursor, the excess you get from your trophy shipments, and the excess you get from your runestones. There are some items that will either cost you time or gold though. The chunks of ancient Ambergris, for example, represent a big part of the overall cost. But every day you can get a free chunk by talking to Taro Everclaw in Arborstone and trading him a fish he asks for. I'm gonna leave a link to the wiki page in the pinned comment that will tell you exactly where to go and what time of the day. And I highly recommend doing this, because each chunk costs 2 gold. That means 20 gold saved every 10 days basically. The most obvious way to acquire the remainder is either by fishing or buying them straight off the trading post. I would advise you to do the latter only when you're still missing some, by the time you have enough Imperial Favor, and I'm gonna explain why in a bit. If you have lower tier fish fillets in your bank, you can actually also trade those in at a fishmonger for one of the higher tiers. And there is no limit to the amount you can trade in, except for Ambergris, which is limited to 5 per day. Sometimes it's actually cheaper to buy the fillets on the trading post and trade those in for Ambergris instead of buying the chunks outright. I'm gonna make a spreadsheet to track this in the next few days, and I'll link it on my Discord server, so feel free to join if you haven't yet. The reason why I mentioned postponing Ambergris outright is because we're gonna need gold for the antique summoning stones. You can only buy 5 per week from Levas in Arborstone and get 1 extra from the Hero's Choice chests in Dragon's End. I personally don't run Dragon's End all that much, as it does take quite some time unless you happen to join a map that is about to fight the boss. Instead, I put all of the gold I saved from my methods I already discussed towards buying the ones I'm still missing. And believe it or not, we actually covered almost all of the ingredients. There are a few which you will still have to farm yourself, namely the Gift of Cantha by exploring all 4 maps, and the Gift of Battle by participating in World vs World, for which I actually have a guide on how to cut your time down from more than 8 hours to less than 4 to obtain a Gift of Battle. There are a few items which I believe you should farm yourself, such as the chunks of pure jade and petrified echovalt resin. Both will take you about 5 to 10 minutes per day, and you can sell the excess once more on the trading post to fund any of the other items you're missing. And there are a few that I actually prefer buying as well, such as the Tales of Adventure and the Lamplighter's badges, which all take rather long to farm and they don't really cost that much anymore. I'm not gonna go over research notes, luck and globs of ectoplasm, as I already made in-depth guides about those, which you can once again find in the pinned comment. The final item I do want to discuss are the Mystic Clovers. You can buy 20 of them per season from the Wizard's Vault, and the 60 Mystic Clovers you can get as well will more than make up for the remainder to craft 1 legendary weapon per season. That means you would be crafting up to 4 legendaries per year with this simple routine, which I reckon is much more than most players will be able to. If you already have other plans for your clovers, I would highly recommend acquiring them through the Mystic Forge instead of buying them from any of the vendors. Even though the Mystic Forge has a roughly 30% chance of granting you clovers, you still get items in return if the crafting fails, all of which will still contribute towards your next legendary or can be sold for gold once more. That's how I plan to make my remaining Aurene legendaries and keeping my costs low. If you have any comments or questions, hit me up down below, and if you don't, you know what to do by now. Like, comment and subscribe.